G'day crew. In this video I'm going to show you how I set up my boat to troll for mackerel and the gear that I use. I shot this footage while I was out on the water and I was going to include it in the previous video, but I thought that made it too long, so here it is as a standalone video. This is what I think of as my primary trolling rod and bottom bashing rod for dropping down offshore. It's a Shimano Backbone Elite. It's 5 foot 7 inches long and it's rated at 15 kilos. So what's that, about 33 pounds? I'm running 80 pound braid on it and it's rated at 33, but I only set the drag between 25% and 30% of the line weight. So the actual drag weight on this is under 15 kilos. The rod seems very happy with it. So I reckon that's all right. The main reason I think about it as my primary rod is it's pretty much more expensive than the other one. It's got the roller guides on it and it's got a Penn Fathom 30 2-speed reel on it. You'll notice that the line's pretty well at the top of the spool there, so I'm not going to fit any more line on it. This is fine for going down up to around a couple of 100 metres if I'm deep dropping. Well, that's not all that deep really as deep dropping goes, but it's okay for up to 200 metres. I've spooled it with 80 pound diver braid, topped off with 80 pound Troll Pro leader. Now I've switched over to Troll Pro leader in the last year or so because it has excellent knot strength, which is better than what I had been using. And it's also quite abrasion resistant. So maybe not quite as good as fluorocarbon, but better than a lot of the monos that I have used. So really happy with the Troll Pro leader on this. And as I say, every rod that I've got has to do double duty because I don't have enough money to buy 50 rods. So this one serves for deep dropping, trolling offshore and trolling for mackerel in the bay. And yes, 80 pound braid and 80 pound line is way too heavy for trolling for mackerel in the bay. Ideally, you should have 30 to 40 pound line on your rod for that, but that would mean buying another rod and reel combo. So this one serves double duty and does the job. I catch mackerel on it, so I'm not disappointed with it. It works just fine. And this is my other rig I use for trolling. It's a Shimano Solstice XT, which is a cheaper variety of rod. Still a nice rod. It's got the Shimano TLD 25 reel on it. Again, cheaper variety of reel. Both my reels are lever drag, I prefer them. And as you can see, there's plenty of space here for extra line if I wanted to put it on. This one's spooled with 80 pound Power Pro braid. Power Pro braid's a 4-strand braid. I've recently swapped from using the 8-strand braids down to the 4-strand braids, mainly because it's more abrasion resistant. And I find that I haven't lost as many fish since I've been using Power Pro on some of my rods, so as the braid wears out, I'm eventually swapping them all over to the Power Pro braid. It's a bit thicker braid, so not quite as good for trolling, but as I say, the rods serve double duty, so it is what it is. Again, this one's got the 80 pound Troll Pro leader on it, but this time I've got 30 metres of Troll Pro leader on this one. Mainly because I've got plenty of room on the spool to fit the 30 metres, and there's a good reason for having 30 metres on it, but that's a story for another time. I'll cover that in another video. It's really got nothing to do with trolling. Well, hasn't got anything to do with the way I'm about to explain trolling for pelagics anyway. So that's it. It's a cheaper setup, so if you're wanting to get into trolling, this will get you started. It's a good deal cheaper than the other setup, and really just as good. Maybe a little bit more chunky to use, doesn't feel quite as nice, but as far as catching the fish goes, I've caught just as many on this as I have on the other one. And if you really want to go deep dropping, that reel has plenty of capacity to put more line on it, so you can drop down 300-400 metres. And that's probably as deep as you ever want to go to wind a fish up from that depth, because you'll be pretty tired by the time you get it up. These are the outrigger-style rod holder extensions that I use for trolling. These allow the tips of the rods to be a lot further away from the boat and therefore reduce the chance of tangling when you troll 2 or more lines. With a little bit of care and some practice, you can troll 3 lines easily, with one of them being in the shotgun position, but I rarely do that for mackerel. Since I've been using these outrigger-style rod holders, I don't think I've had a single tangle, whereas I've had several before I got them. I'm not saying it's impossible to avoid tangles if you haven't got them, but it's much easier to avoid tangles if you have got them. You do need to make sure that you've got all the adjustments done up tight, or you risk having them rotate when a fish hits. There are several variations to these, and some may suit your circumstances better than others. I'll put a link to some of them down in the video description if you're interested. I've been using these trolling boards from Mr. Bait for quite a few seasons now. They come pre-rigged and ready to fish from Mr. Bait, but I've been using these for so long that I have re-rigged most of them at some point, due to age and wear. I've done a video on setting these up in the past, and there's a link to it up in the top corner. You'll also want some safety ropes to attach to your rods. I just use dog leads for that. They are a must-have, and I always use them, except when I don't. In fact, I did lose a rod a while back. I'd set up the rods and I'd laid these safety lines out, but I got distracted and I didn't attach the safety lines to the rods before I put them out. And of course, that was a perfect time for something big to hit it. Lesson learned. Don't get distracted while you're rigging your rods. I use these builder's string line frames to store my trolling boards and lines on. It keeps them from getting tangled and makes them easy to deploy. I picked these particular ones up from Bunnings Hardware. I couldn't find them online, but they were on the shelves when I went in. I particularly like these because the boards just lay nicely across it. I'll also mention that you can wrap the line in such a way that you can attach the planer board to your main line first and then let it out. I always wrap the line on that way, but I don't often attach it to the main line first. No excuse really, I just hope I never drop one.
Got something on it. Grinner, by the looks of it. Well, it didn't take long to get a grinner. This one up as well. Oh, it must be. Yeah, it is. Now the grinner. Well, that's what he is. Little one this time. Oh. Crab bait.
I started off by trolling the area around the Hope Banks. I had heard a couple of reports that said the Hope Banks was one of the places to be if you wanted to catch mackerel for the week that I was out. Unfortunately for me, the mackerel hadn't got that memo. But the grinners had, and all I managed to get was grinner after grinner after grinner. Some blokes say that when you're pulling up a lot of grinners when you're trolling for school mackerel, it's because your lures are too far back from the boat and you need to bring them in closer. But honestly, I have never seen any evidence to support this. Now, I seem to catch grinners no matter how far my lines are out. In fact, I caught one grinner so close to the boat that I actually saw it catch the spoon. I was pulling the line in to move to somewhere else at the time. And even though I've never seen any proof to support the theory, I still try varying the distance of my lines are out when I encounter grinners. It can't hurt to try. After all, Anything that's not working for you, you need to think about changing your methodology. But despite changing the distance that the lures are out, it hasn't changed the number of grinners that I catch. Now, by all means, try anything you can to avoid catching the grinners if that's what you want. But if you also go after crabs, do keep in mind that they make excellent crab bait, so catching them is not a total loss.
Well, get the rods in and go try somewhere else, eh? Haven't done any good here.
This is another thing that I like about the builder's string line frames for keeping the trolling rigs on. I just quickly wind the line onto it while I'm moving from one location to another. The next spot I tried was in the Rous. When the mackerel move west out of the Rainbow Channel, the Rous and the Hope Banks are two of the likely candidates to look for them at. There are a number of other spots around the bay, but they do tend to show up in these two a lot of the time. And this one on the screen is the area of the Rous where I find them most of the time. Again, not a rule, but an indication. This is the area that's bounded by 2 greens and 2 reds.
Oh, we got one up. We got one up. Hopefully got something worth having on this case. That's the question. Might have, I think. Oh yeah, I think we might have this time. Definitely have. Ah, beauty. Settle down. Get that straight back out there. Sort him out in a minute. Good, I was just thinking I'd have to give up. Yeah, okay. I'll settle you down. Yeah. Very important to bleed the mackerel straight away. Right. Yeah, get him in here. Ah, blood everywhere. Wasn't what I wanted. Yeah, a bit of water in this again, so blood doesn't stick everywhere. Make sure we're not running into anything. Right, now, get some water in amongst the ice. Cool that down. Oh, bigger picky first. I forgot my happy snap. 60.
In general, when you get a strike, you want to keep circling around that area to see if you can pick up some more of the school. More often than not, you'll pull up a few more before the school disappears. There have been a few times where I've bagged out just circling around a single area where I got my first strike. Now, I don't mean tight circles. You don't want to get tangles in the rigs you're trolling if you've got two or more of them out. Even if you've got your lines set out properly, and I'll go into that later in the video, but even if you've got your lines set out properly, you still don't want to turn too tightly. You certainly don't want to turn so tightly that you cut back across one of the lines that's still trailing out. Depending on the mackerel school and where you are, circling around can mean a circle with a radius of several hundred metres. But when I'm on a really hot bite, and those times that I've bagged out in particular, I've found that it's a good idea to pull in one of the lines, just fish one line at a time, and tighten up your circle so you can stay over the school more. And the other consideration is that with a really hot bite, two lines can be a lot to handle for one guy on the boat. As you can see from my track, I persevered longer than I should have, trying to find the rest of the school that one mackerel came from. I have no doubt that mackerel was part of a school, but the rest of them eluded me. I started out using the Yamacitra boards, however you pronounce it, but they're not available anymore. They've stopped making them, so these are the boards that I buy from Mr. Bait now. Mr. Bait does carry some that look like the old Yamacitra boards, but I've not used them and I can't recommend them. I can recommend the orange K5 and K8 boards from Mr. Bait, so if you're wanting some, I suggest you ask Frank which ones he thinks will work best for your situation. I'm sure if you ask him, Frank will steer you in the right direction. This slide is a top view of how I troll my lures, although, as I said earlier, I don't use a shotgun in the bay. Before I got the outrigger-style rod holders that I showed in the beginning of the video, I used to use the top setup. At first I tried trolling with hand lines because I thought that would be easier to handle. It didn't take long to work out that wasn't so. I find that using rods is much easier even if you don't have the outrigger-style rod holders that I have, because I was using rods before I got them. Not only do you get less tangles when you're using rods, or at least I do, but it's also easier to see when there's a fish on, or if the lure has picked up some weed or something, just by watching the rod tip. Nowadays, I always troll the bottom pattern, although again, without the shotgun when I'm in the bay. One of the keys to avoiding tangles is to have one side let out further than the other. I'll show you what I mean in the next slide. Now here I'm showing the 5 metre diver and the 8 metre diver. That's the K5 and the K8 trolling boards. I always troll both boards when I'm deep enough to be able to troll the 8 metre board. Otherwise I'll deploy two 5 metre divers. The key point is to have the rear board further back than the front board. I put the rear board about 1.5 times the length of the line between the spoon and the board further back than the front board. Hopefully that'll make sense. Even if you're running two 5 metre divers or two boards with the same diving depth, having this sort of separation distance horizontally will ensure that the boards are also separated vertically, as shown in the slide. Having this sort of vertical separation allows you to turn the bait more sharply without tangling your lines than you otherwise would be able to. As you can see in the slide, even if the lines do cross, one line's going to go above the other line and they won't tangle. So how do I know when my boards are separated by 20 to 25 metres? That's where the multicolour braid that I use comes in. It changes colour every 10 metres and has an additional mark at every metre. So I know how long my leader is. I just count the colours and the marks so that I know I'm 20 to 25 metres further out than what I counted on the previous line. Now, I mentioned earlier not using the 8 metre diver when the water isn't deep enough, but what is deep enough? Is it 8 metres or not? Now the 8-metre diver and the 5-metre diver are only going to reach those depths under optimal conditions. Not only does the speed of trolling count, but it also means you can't have too much drag from the line you're using, or that will reduce the depth that the board can dive to. Now for instance, my 80-pound braid will prevent my boards from diving as deeply as someone who's using 40-pound braid, all other things being equal. The size of the swivels that you're using and the size of the spoon you're using will also make a difference. The biggest difference, however, comes from the speed that you're trolling at. Most of these boards reach their maximum depth when trolled at around 7 knots. I seldom reach that speed when I'm trolling for mackerel in the bay. I mostly troll at around 5 to 6 knots. If I can see fish on the sounder that I think are mackerel and I'm not getting any hits, I might try varying the speed between 4 and 7 knots. Another reason to change the speed is if the depth of the water that you're in changes. A lot of the areas that I troll are around banks and drop-offs, so it may be necessary for me to pass over a shallower section occasionally. Now, slowing down when you cross over a shallower section will bring the boards closer to the surface and allow you to cross without having to pull the boards in. If you misjudge it, the board will hit the sand, and most of the time the drag will start screaming like you have a big fish on. Can be an exciting moment until you realise what's happened. You only need to misjudge it a couple of times before you get the hang of it. And just to be clear, I don't mean that you can get across something really shallow where you've got to tip your engine up to get past. That won't work. But it's easy enough to get through an area at, say, the depth is half the rated diving depth of the boards you're trolling if you just slow down enough. Speed up again when you get to deeper water. The techniques I've described work well, even though I didn't come home with a stellar catch this time. Doesn't matter how good your technique is, you've still got to be in the right spot for the fish. As I said in the previous video, this was an overnight mission. The next morning I tried trolling around the east and north side of Peel without success again. I was going to head over to try around Wellington Point and the south side of Green Island, but I decided to pick up the crab pots and head home instead. After I got home, I was told that there were plenty of mackerel around the Wellington Point leads, so probably should have gone over there. But that's fishing. You can't always be in the right spot at the right time. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you found some useful tips in it, and I hope it helps you catch a few mackerel. Until next time, good fishing.